Good morning. I'm Andrea with Happy Cloud Creations. I designed the Starlight Mountains quilt that we are using for this quilt along. I will wait a couple seconds to see if some people jump on. Oh good, some people are jumping on. Make sure to say hi so I can make sure I can see comments. If it says live up in this corner, I think this corner, it means I'm live. If not, you are watching a replay. Good morning, Deborah. Good morning, Connie. Patricia. Hello, hello, hello. I'm a little tired this morning. So I got some coffee. That's why I'm running 1 minute late. Someone asked me to put this up last week. Week 4. We are on week 4 of the Starlight Mountains Quilt Along. Yay! This week we are making our last blocks. And next week, week 5, you'll get instructions on how to add your borders and how to complete your quilt. Good morning, Dory. Trying to wake up a little here. I don't want to get into it until a little more people jump on. Hi, Peggy. If anybody has questions about this week's block, that's kind of why I didn't jump on yesterday at 7, because some people don't get the email till I got it at 6 a.m. So I just want to make sure everybody had a chance to look over the pattern, see if they had any questions about this block. It's probably a lot easier than last week's block, just because last week you had 6 of them, and there was a lot of pieces, a lot of small pieces. This week's block has some bigger pieces, which I forgot my quilt's in the other room again. So I can't show you the finished block, but let's see. Oh, good, Connie. Does the sign help? Week 4. Sorry, it's not very dark. But week 4, yay! Because I know last week some people had some trouble finding the video, and they went to the last week's video. All right, so everyone should have their pattern downloaded. I also updated the PDF that is located in the file section of the group for Twin, Queen, King, and Scrappy for 1 block cutting instructions. So if you need those, if you're making one of those sizes, go to the file section of the group and you can download that PDF. I am intimidated by the cutting as usual. I got an AccuQuilt Go Baby from eBay and I'm waiting for some dies. Oh, cool, Connie. I've never tried an AccuQuilt, but I'm sure they're very helpful. Cutting can be intimidating, especially if your ruler slides a lot. When I cut, I usually try to press as hard as I can when I cut. There's a lot of non-slip rulers, and those are helpful. Or sometimes you can get this like handle that kind of sticks to your ruler, and that can help too. Haven't even had time to start yet, but it's all printed. Awesome, Peggy. You know, it's never too late to start a quilt. So if you didn't start with the rest of the group, that's fine too. All right. Oh, sorry, my phone. Let's get into it before my kids wake up. They're still sleeping and school starts in like 2 hours. So I think we can get this done. So the first step in this block is the square and square for the center, which I went over in week 2, but I'll kind of go over it again today, just so if you aren't doing week 2, you can just skip to this one. So you will draw a line from one corner to the other of these little 2.5-inch squares, and your large square will be 4.5 by 4.5 inches. I like to use a hair marker just because it doesn't leave ink on my fabric and I don't have to worry about it washing away. But also I like this disappearing ink pen. Got a Joann's. It actually fades, but then if you iron it, it reappears. But it does wash out. I know sometimes other pens do not wash out, so you got to be careful of that. But you draw one line from one end to the other, and you're going to want to stitch right up against that line. If it's too far this way, it's not going to end up correctly. You won't have a 1/4 inch seam allowance on top. If you go too far in, this corner won't fold all the way up to this corner. So once you sew those lines right up against that line. I know you can't really see because I used the hair marker this morning. I couldn't find my other example. So once you sew that, you're going to want to finger press this open all the way to the corner and then press it with your iron. Now I have another one. So this one's done. If this corner does not reach the corner of your backing, I would suggest only cutting the center layer out. Of course, my fingers aren't working. Just cut the center layer out. That way, I'll do it for you. If you cut the center layer out, you can see where the line should be. So that way when you sew another block up against this, you will know where to line it up. But hopefully these triangles are meeting. And if they do, you can just cut both of those layers in the back out. Sometimes when mine don't reach, I will leave that back layer just so I know where to line my block up at. Morning, good morning. More people are jumping on. Sometimes I don't know if this early is too early for people, but 7 a.m. on the West Coast means 10 a.m. on the East Coast, correct? All right. So let me clean up my little area real quick. So next you're going to want to put 2 more 2.5 inch squares down. I'm going to go down here so you guys can kind of just see how I do that. I take my hair marker, I line it up here, and then I'm like, okay, there, and I just go like that. You would do the same thing with a pen, mark your line. And then I mark the second line. Sometimes if I mess up, I will just flip it around and I'll try again on this line because I don't want a line that's not completely straight. And then I like to line the corners up and the edges up. And I am a big pinner. I like to pin everything in place. So I'll pin those in place. Boom. I'll do the same thing with this corner. And then you got to make sure, let's see, where's the next one? Then you're going to want to sew along that line as well. I'm back. This one's done, and then it has the 3 layers. And again, if your corners meet the corners, when you put the corners and then press, you can cut both layers out. But if they don't, just cut the center layer out. That way you know what you should be lining up with, because these need to end at 4.5 by 4.5. If they're ending up a little bit bigger, trim down. I suggest trimming and measuring after each step. That's why in my patterns, after each step it says, this unit will measure 4.5 by 4.5. Trim if needed. That's why it's important to read all the instructions. That way you can go, okay, mine did measure that, perfect. I can next move to the next step. So we got our square and squares done. Let's cut this side as well. So my colors are all over the place because I'm making 3 scrappy blocks. My whole quilt is scrappy if you haven't seen previously. So all my blocks are a little different. Then next we're going to go to the rectangular diamondish piece. And we're going to do the same thing we did with the square and square. We're going to mark our line, and then you're going to sew right up against that line. If you have a thicker, like this gives me a thicker line than my hair marker, you're going to want to chop your thread into the side of the line toward this side of the block, not this side of the block. Chop it right into the line on this upper side of the block. Still need my second cup of coffee? Yeah, Connie. I'm starting on my first one. I've been up since 5. So I should have had some coffee earlier, but I was busy sewing because because I didn't get any sewing done this weekend. So again, you will press these open with your finger. I just kind of hold it here so that both corners are meeting and press it with my iron. Let's see. So this one's done. And if you do see a little bit of white, can you see that? How I see a little bit of white on the edges? Since I want it to match up with that pink, I'll just go like this. Go, okay. I know that's barely any, but another one had a little bit more. I just want to make sure it's perfect. As perfect as it can be for a human-made quilt. We're not machines. So then I would just, since those corners meet, I would clip these back 2 layers, about 1/4 of an inch. I just eyeball it. I don't like using my rotary cutter for these just because I don't want it to slip and then ruin all my hard work. I know other people prefer rotary cutters at all their cutting, but I like these. These are nice sharp scissors. My husband got them for me. They do the trick. So we have this piece now. Oh, did I forget to mark? And then you're going to want to place, you're going to mark your line, place it up by the blue or your center color. What color is that? Your C color. And then you're going to put your D color by your other D color and do that again. Sew them. And then like this one, I pressed. See, you can see a little pink at the top. I left the back layer because I want to make sure I have that straight line to line up my next block to it. Can you see that? Just a tiny bit, but I kind of want it to be as good as it can be. And then I got these second layers. That one matches up perfect. Didn't do all my cutting this morning. All right, so we have this unit done. And this unit, if you look at the bottom, but it's page 2, this unit should measure 6.5 by 4.5. So we want it to be 6.5 inches tall, 4.5 inches wide. If it is not, trim it to size. And when I trim these kind of blocks, I like to measure from the center out. So since it's supposed to be 4.5 inches wide, you're going to want your point to line up on your ruler at the 2 1/4 inch mark. Because half of 4.5 is 2 1/4. So you want your points to line up at the 2 1/4 inch, and it'll be perfect. Oh, this talking is drying my throat out this morning. Okay, so next we're going to do the corner. I like making all the units, and then you have all the units, and then you can put your block together. These instructions are for 3 quilt blocks. If you're making a twin, queen, or king, make sure to check those cutting instructions and also the layout, suggested layouts. They will tell you how many blocks to make. So here is another point in your quilt where you're going to want to make sure you have that scant 1/4 inch seam. I know a lot of people are like, what is this? And they're all stressing out about it. If you are making your blocks and they're ending up the correct size, don't worry about it. You are probably sewing a 1/4 inch scant seam and you didn't even realize it this whole time. If your blocks are ending up small or too large, that's when you want to check your seam allowance. If your blocks are ending up too small, then your seam is probably too small, a couple thread widths. If your blocks are ending up too big, your seam allowance is probably a couple thread widths too small. So that's why I have that test in the fabric requirements section of the quilt pattern. All of my patterns have this. That way you can check. Also, I was reading, it can depend on the thread you're using. It can depend on the fabric you're using. If you're using a thinner fabric, when you fold open that fabric, it's going to take up less space than if you were using a thicker fabric. So that's why I recommend doing that test. I have a 1/4 inch foot. It was just called a 1/4 inch foot for my Janome machine. And it gives me this scant 1/4 inch seam. And so I don't worry about it much. You don't really have to stress out about it. If your blocks are ending up smaller, just know, okay, my blocks are going to end up smaller. And then I'm going to have to adjust once it comes out to the layout. And I can talk about that next week. If your blocks are ending up smaller, I can give you some tips to make all of your rows end up the same size. Thank you, Faruka. Is that how you pronounce your name? I'm glad you like the instructions. I try to be as clear as possible, but sometimes in my brain, things make sense and then they don't come out that way. So that's why when you write patterns, you should have multiple quilt testers. And we had, I don't know how many, I think I had 6 of my quilt testers help me with this quilt pattern. Thank you so much for you guys helping me with this. And you guys know who you are. Okay. Good morning, honey. I'm on a video. Put some jammies on. The kids are waking up. All right, so now I'm gonna get into why that 1/4 inch matters. So we're gonna sew our 2.5 by 4.5 inch strip to the side of a 4.5 by 4.5 inch square. And if this seam isn't correct, this strip, this 2.5 by 2.5 by 6.5 inch strip won't match up correctly. If your seam allowance is too big, your block will end up too small. This unit will end up too small. But if it's the correct scant 1/4 inch seam, these will match up perfectly, and then you can sew. I like to pin and sew that together. Good morning, good morning. So I have these two. I sewed them together. I always like to finger press them open, but then also I do press with the iron. I think some people may have misunderstood me and didn't realize I'm finger pressing it open, but then I'm also pressing with the iron. And then I like to measure this. At the end of this step, it tells you this should measure 6.5 by 6.5 inches. And I'll show you, sometimes fabric can stretch a little, and so that's why sorry guys, I like to line my ruler up. And you know, sometimes I don't cut perfectly when I cut my strips. So see how this white strip is a little bit longer than this block? Instead of just leaving it and hoping it'll be okay, I just like to trim it off so that I know that I'm going to have a straight, almost perfect straight line to connect it to my other pieces and my other blocks. And then all your pieces fit together like a puzzle. If you're seeing at the end of these steps that, okay, my block's that size. Okay, that my block's that size. When you go to this last step to add all of your blocks together, they're going to line up perfectly and you're going to be able to sew them together correctly. Did I understand you updated the PDF for the quilt sizes? Wondering if I needed to download. Tammy, yes, I updated it so that you have week 4's cutting instructions in it as well. Before it only had week 1, 2, and 3. So now it has week 4 in there too. So you can go download this week's instructions, cutting instructions. Love the pattern, wanting to make a quilt with this block scrappy. Think it would be really cute. Yes, Pat, I think it would be super cute just to make the block scrappy too. My quilt is going to be scrappy, so each one of my blocks are different. I can't wait to share it to you guys next week. I'm hoping to have all the whole top done so you guys can see it next week. I'll post a picture in the group. So when we're going to this point, you know, in block 2, where we had to join that square and square with the flying geese, you're going to have that same thing here. You're going to be joining these 2 pieces together. And to make sure your triangles, your points, line up and aren't like kind of not correct, that's one reason when you trim these to measure 2 1/4 inches from the sides. And then also, I like to take a pin and I just poke it right through the point of my block. I don't know if you can see that. Point of my block. And then I line it up with the point on this block. And then I kind of just line the corners up. I pin the corners, and then I'll go and I'll pin this right there so that it's pinned up as close as it can be. You know, sometimes when you're sewing, things shift a little. That's why I like to do pins. If you're kind of worried about it, you can put pins here as well. Do 5 pins, as many pins as you want. Plus the sizes for the other sizes had a typo, correct? Yes, and so the last week's PDF that I put in the group for the twin, queen, king, and scrappy for weeks 1, 2, 3, it had a typo on the piece that said 2 and 7/8 by 3 and 7/8. It should have just been 2 and 7/8 by 2 and 7/8. If you saw the actual pattern, you would have noticed that, because in the pattern there's no pieces for 2 and 7/8 by 3 and 7/8. They're all squares. So hopefully everybody noticed that. How do I get the pattern? Judith. You go to the announcements section in this group. There will be a link to the pattern. I'll put it in the description of this video when I'm done. I can't kind of edit it right now, but I will do that afterwards. Thank you for the wonderful pattern. Thank you, Anne. I'm so glad you like it. I hope everybody likes this. Does anybody have any questions about this block? I know it's pretty simple, especially compared to last week's. Last week's was kind of a doozy for people. And this week, you only have 3 blocks. So if you didn't finish last week's, you have some time to catch up. I know this is a very quick quilt along. Usually quilt alongs that I do are about 8 to 9 weeks. This one's only 5 weeks. So we're getting our quilt super fast, which is really cool. We'll be able to snuggle in it quicker than usual. If anybody has any questions, I can answer them, maybe. Trying to think if there's anything. Oh, that's right. I said I was going to tell you guys about next week. Next week, you get instructions on how to add your borders and how to baste, quilt, bind your quilt. I will give you tips on those, things that I like to do, things that I like to use. So next week, you're going to be ready for next week. There's kind of a little preview. It's going to tell you how to put all your blocks together, how to make your binding strips, how to add your binding strips. And then the last page is always how to finish your quilt, how to make your binding, how to attach your binding, quilt and everything. So I got my binding fabric. Since mine's super scrappy. Sorry, not crappy, scrappy. All different colors with white background. I'm going to use this black and white stripe for my binding. I thought that might be cute. I've never used black and white stripe for my binding, and I've been wanting to so bad. So I'm going to use this black and white stripe. Trying the scant, don't quite know why to do it, but what the heck. I'm just curious. Good job, Guinea. I posted an article in the group about why it's important. I'll link it in your comment afterwards. Another quilter explained it, and I think it was Diary of a Quilter website. She explains it a lot better than I can. Instructions are clear to me. My day of sewing is good. Yay! Will you be putting in suggestions for the quilting part at the end? I'll kind of give you guys some ways that I like to quilt next week in my video. In the pattern, it kind of just says quilt the 3 layers, because some people like to free motion quilt. Some people like to straight line quilt. I'll show you the ones that I like. I have a few quilt examples over on my couch. I'll show you guys those. Here's my binding I'm using for my scrappy. Personally, if I don't have yardage, or like sometimes it's hard to get yardage right now, I like my go-to sheet is from Target, the Ultra Soft Threshold sheet. It's really soft, and you can just get it in a flat sheet. You don't have to get the whole set. I think it's like only $10. Thread count 300. So a lot of quilters don't like using sheets as backings, but if you go for 300 or less thread count, you're better off. If you go for something that with a too high of thread count, it can dull your needle faster. So this is my go-to, but I'm not using for this for this quilt because they didn't have any bright poppy colors in this brand. So I found this sheet set. It's 100% cotton, 220 thread count. I've never used this brand Pillow Fort, but I thought this was super cute, all these dots. I thought that would match the front of my quilt really well, and especially with this stripe binding. I thought that would be super cute. So that's what I'm going to do. So you're going to want to make sure you have binding fabric, backing fabric, and batting. I just got this in the mail. I like to use Warm and Plush. It's a little thicker than like the Warm and Natural and the Warm and White. Not sponsored, guys. These are just what I like. I know some places you can't get this brand, but I like this. There's no flecks of brown like the Warm and Natural has. So this is the batting that I will be using. It's just like a cream color. Since I have a lot of white in it, I probably should be using the Warm and White. But I really like how this one's a little puffier when it washes up. So I'm going to be doing that. Love your binding choice. Thank you, Colleen. I'm really excited about doing the stripe binding. I've never done that before. And so I think that will look really cool, especially with all the bright colors on the front of my quilt. I was referring to the twin full king sheet. I see it is being updated each week. Yes, Tammy, it was updated this week so that it has week 4 in it. So I would upload it again, download it again. So you have week 4's cutting instructions. I piece my backings. I piece my backings a lot too. It's just right now, all the colors that I wanted, a lot of shops are out of certain Kona cottons, and I wanted something colorful this time, and I don't have to piece it, so that's pretty cool. This is a twin size, I think. You just want to make sure it's going to be 6 inches wider and 6 inches longer than your quilt top. So this one is 66 by 96, so that'll be perfect, the flat sheet, and then I'm going to use the fitted sheet for a baby quilt. But yes, definitely, you can piece your backing. You can do whatever you want, guys. Patterns are a suggestion. They kind of give you tips, and like when my pattern says to press to the side, I like doing that for nesting. But if you like pressing your seams open for less bulk, do that. It's your quilt. Do it how you want to do it. If you don't like the 4 at 1 time flying geese and you prefer the 1 at 1 time flying geese, do that. I want this to be enjoyable and fun, not something that you're dreading. So I hope you guys are happy there's no flying geese in this week's block. I hope you guys are enjoying the quilt along. If you do like my quilts, please follow me over at Happy Cloud Creations on Facebook. I think it's facebook.com/shop Happy Cloud Creations. I also have a blog where I have a few free patterns over there. It's happycloudcreations.com. So you can go check those out. And yeah, I'm also on Instagram, happycloudcreations.com. And I hope you guys follow me to see what else I will be working on. I hope you guys like it. I like this pattern. It reminds me of camping and the mountains and the starlight. So I hope you guys like it too. I think it's about time for my kids to get up. My alarm just went off. One's up. The little girl isn't up yet. She's only 6, almost 7, so she's still sleeping. But I need to get her up so we can get ready for school. So if you guys ever have questions, you can email me at happycloudcreations@gmail.com. You can also direct message me on my Happy Cloud Creations Facebook page. If you direct message me to Andrea Smith, sometimes I don't see it because if we're not friends, it'll just go into this spam folder and I don't see it always. So emailing me or direct messaging me to the Happy Cloud Creations or just in the group. You can tag me by doing the @ Andrea Smith, and that'll tag me saying, hey, I have a question, and maybe I can try to get back to you as soon as I can since I'll be doing remote learning with my kids all day. So we'll see. I hope you guys have a great day, and I will talk to you next. I think I'll be on next Tuesday morning at 7 a.m. as well to give you some tips on adding your borders, basting, quilting, binding. All right. You guys have a great day, and I will talk to you next Tuesday. Goodbye.